All right. Well, it is noon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Tabitha Robinson. I'm the president of WPCTN. Thanks again for tuning in for today's Lunch and Learn. We've got a lot to cover, so I'm going to remind everyone that we have a legislative recap on reproductive health law and policy on Tuesday, June 10th at noon, another Lunch and Learn. So if you're interested in that as well, please go to WPCTN.com and register. And before we get started, I would like to introduce our panelists and our moderator today, and then I'm going to pass it off to Judge Escobar. So Judge Escobar was elected to the General Sessions Court in August 2018, and she was reelected in August of 2022. She is one of 4 judges that hear civil orders of protections and domestic violence criminal cases 9 months out of the year. She presides over Athena's Court, a treatment court for human trafficking survivors and those at risk of sexual exploitation. She has a huge passion for public service. She has served on many nonprofit boards, government boards, and commissions. She has given her time to the Planning Commission, the Davidson County Election Commission, the Board of Equalization, and the State Judicial Nominating Commission. In 2012, she co-founded My City Academy, a leadership program that enables neighborhood leaders to learn about metro government. She also co-founded the National Hispanic Bar Association and the Wings Foundation of Tennessee. One of our panelists today, Bree Sunshine Smith, is an Emmy Award-winning meteorologist, author, and advocate. Bree is accredited by the American Meteorological Society and National Weather Association. During her 15-year career as a broadcast meteorologist, she authored the first ever fact-based children's book for toddlers and was the first to speak on gender equity issues within the weather enterprise both at AMS and NWA. Recently, she extended her advocacy work to include victims' rights around the use of AI to create deepfakes without consent, lending her personal story in support of the Preventing Deepfakes bill in Tennessee. Another one of our panelists today, Jason Powell. He is the state representative for District 53, which is located in South Nashville. First elected in 2012, Representative Powell currently serves on the House Judiciary and State Committees and has held numerous leadership positions in the Democratic caucus. He has passed bills creating Tennessee benefit corporations, smart contracts and blockchain, and strengthened the state's revenge porn laws. A native of Nashville, Representative Powell is a real estate broker licensed in 4 states, an entrepreneur, and the father of 2 kids with his wife Heather, the CEO of the Tennessee Kidney Foundation. And then John Spraggins, a lifelong Nashvilleian. John advocates for whistleblowers, victims of discrimination and abuse, people who have been hurt or killed by medical malpractice, and others who were defrauded, injured, or killed by corporate misconduct or individual wrongdoing. A former national scene writer and columnist and a senior aide to former Representative Jim Cooper, John teaches a class on class action litigation at Vanderbilt Law School and is a longtime board member of Planned Parenthood of Tennessee in North Mississippi, as well as a founding board member of the Tennessee Freedom Circle. He and Claire Maneely, owner of Dozen Bakery, have 2 young daughters. So that wraps up the bios for today. So I'm going to pass it off to Judge Escobar to get us started. Judge Escobar?
Thank you so much, WPC, for having me today. And I want to wish everyone who is joining us a good afternoon. Today, we will be speaking about Preventing Deepfake Images Act that passed in the legislature this past session. AI is a powerful tool for good and for evil. And unfortunately, today we will be speaking about the abuse of this technology. The FBI Internet Crime Complaint Center reported that in 2023, there were approximately 34,000 victims of deep fake technology. And in 2024, there was approximately 54,000 victims. So let's start. Bree, last fall, you started being targeted by perpetrators impersonating you online with fake social media accounts and deep fake videos. Could you share with us what occurred?
Yeah, and thank you for having me. Thank you for hosting this important conversation. So this started for me last October, just before Halloween. I received an email from someone that I did not know who said, Bree, I think I've been contacted by an imposter. I'm not sure the best way to get a hold of you. Email seems like the best option. And I wrote him back because I did not know the person. I never sent a direct message to that person on another platform and said, wasn't me. I'm so sorry you were targeted by an imposter. Please report it and block it. And then he wrote me back the next day and said, well, I just want you to know that I think it might be your husband because they had pictures that only a husband would have. And I wrote him back and I said, there are no pictures that, quote, a husband should have. And my husband would never do anything like that. I assure you it's an imposter. Please report and block it. And that person wrote me a third time and said, well, I just want you to know that they were very convincing and that they had invited that person into a private chat. And within that private chat, they had shared 2 images that were of my face on someone else's semi-nude body and a video that had been manipulated with AI to make it look like I was saying things that I was not saying and doing things that I was not doing, that I was verifying identity. And that's when I knew that we had really crossed a threshold that I had never encountered before. When I went to my employer at that point, I shared it with them to say, I don't know what to do. And that's when I learned that it's not, at that point, it was not illegal in the state of Tennessee to take someone's image, likeness, distort it with AI, and create something indecent. Since then, it has evolved, and there have been multiple imposter accounts. Sometimes they're pretending to be me, sometimes they're pretending to be fan accounts, sometimes they're pretending to be everyday citizens. Sometimes they reply to comments on my Facebook page, sometimes they send direct messages to people that follow me online. But the aim is the same. They're always trying to get whomever they've targeted into some sort of private conversation where either photographs or interactions are promised, fan experiences, going to dinner, me coming to their house in exchange for money, financial information, or identity information. And it continues to grow. I mean, at this point, there are hundreds of imposter accounts online, and the strategies continue to evolve.
So at the beginning, what social media platforms were you aware that these posts were being posted on? And how did those platforms respond to you?
So when this first happened in October, the first person that reached out to me, he didn't tell me where the initial point of contact was, but he had been directed into a private chat on Signal, which I was not aware of at the time. Since then, the majority of the imposters, 99% of them, are on Facebook. I've seen 2 on TikTok. I've not encountered any on Twitter. I've not encountered any on Instagram with this particular strategy. I have tried reporting and blocking these pages. Sometimes Meta comes back and says, we took it down. Sometimes they come back and say this doesn't violate our regulations and our guidelines, even if it's plain as day. My pictures that have been copied, that have been duplicated, the format of the page looks exactly like my primary page. What's been really insidious over the last few months is that they are whomever or whatever is behind these imposters or these fake accounts, they're incorporating new portions of the story. Like they're writing to people, as you know, I've been advocating against AI. As you know, I no longer work with my previous employer. And so they're incorporating new parts of the story to try to be that much more convincing, to trick people into sending information, money, identifying information.
So it's getting more sophisticated, would you say?
Definitely getting more sophisticated.
What kind of effect did all this have on you at the time when this started happening to you?
It's um, it's deeply traumatizing. You know, at initially and for the first few months, I didn't know what language to even call this. I didn't know where to go for help. I didn't know what to Google for help. I didn't know what resources might be available to me, and it felt very powerless. When your name and your image and your likeness are being distorted in such a disgusting way, and then being used to try and target other people, steal their personal information. You know, for me, my entire career was working to keep people safe, and now my identity was being used to compromise their safety. That was really gutting. I mean, gutting to me as a person, gutting to me for my life's work. And really initially for the first few months, powerlessness and just an overwhelming sadness, and a lot of paranoia, because when these things start to happen digitally, it's like it never stops. You know, it's such a personal violation that the internet doesn't turn off, the internet doesn't stop. And for as many imposter accounts as I have found, there are hundreds that I haven't. Since I came forward to testify, there have been some folks in internet security and identity security that have come forward that have tried to kind of walk alongside me and help me, and they have discovered hundreds of accounts that I never even found on my own. And so existing with the knowledge that you don't know how you're being distorted and how you're being violated at any given moment on the internet there's a perpetuality to it that's really difficult to manage.
I'm so sorry, Bree. Um, Now, how did you meet Representative Powell?
I actually knew Representative Powell from many moons ago. He was instrumental working with a colleague of mine to pass a bill called the Safe Places Bill that allowed businesses and organizations to open up during severe weather events without fear of legal retribution. And so I knew Representative Powell through a good friend of mine and a previous colleague. And then as I started to kind of navigate these murky AI waters with John, uh, I kept saying, I was like, I want to make this better. I don't want my story to just be my story. I want to use it. I want to help. I want to change this reality for myself, but also knowing I've got two small boys. I've got an 11-year-old and a 7-year-old. It's like, if I can't stop this for me, then I can't stop this for them. And that's unacceptable. Like the fact that I was told nothing we can do, that can't be the final answer. So that was when John got me connected with Representative Powell, who was already advocating for the Preventing Deepfakes Act. And we started to sort of walk in tandem together.
Wonderful. And Representative Powell, what interested you in this issue? And also, if you could tell us what this new state law entails and what's the sentencing?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me, and good to see you, Judge Escobar.
Yeah.
So I had worked on legislation previously in a previous General Assembly, strengthening the revenge porn laws, and had actually introduced a similar deepfake bill, but it was only applicable to minors. At the time, I have a general interest in technology, and I think the interesting thing about technology, when we're talking about legislation, is you want to be careful because technology evolves so quickly. As legislators, we literally get together for 3 months out of the year, and so things can evolve from one session to the next. Where AI was considered a very fringe topic, very few people knew about it, to now, most people are very familiar with AI. Some people interact with it on a daily basis, right? So I think you have to be careful when you're dealing with technology, specifically legislatively, to make sure that you get it right, that you don't approach something that could quite frankly limit the capabilities of that technology, which we've gotten wrong in the past. But with AI, try to run this bill dealing with minors a couple years ago, and quite frankly, my colleagues just didn't understand what I was talking about. They didn't see the threat this could potentially pose. So the bill really did not get much traction. Both there was a Democratic, was the Democratic bill, there was a Republican bill introduced, and neither of us got any traction trying to pass the AI deepfake bill for minors. So, but I was fortunate, was able to pass the strengthening our revenge porn laws and continue to be interested in deepfakes. I do believe that AI holds incredible promise, incredible potential, but it's things like this when it can be abused to exploit people and to damage individuals in the public, where I think it's the responsibility of the legislature to take action and to run bills. So I had been working with a group called Public Citizen, had reached out to me. Oftentimes when we introduce bills, even when we're unsuccessful, after a session ends, you get multiple groups that reach out to you and say, I saw that you ran this piece of legislation. We're very interested in it. Would you be interested in, we've developed some model legislation looking at expanding this to not just be for minors, but to be for the general public. And so we have been interacting with that group, having different discussions with people that are interested in these topics. And then right as we were getting ready to introduce bills for session, Bree contacted me and shared with me her story. And quite frankly, I was just, first of all, admire her strength and courage to even contact me and to share that and appreciate her vulnerability that she shared with me. But then also, it made me very angry, quite frankly, to have someone that I considered a friend and an acquaintance that I know very well to be targeted like this and to have their reputation damaged. You know, Bree mentioned that I'd worked on the weather bill, the Safer Places bill, and that bill is designed to make sure that people have a place to go in the event of severe storms. And I have a true appreciation for the service that, and it is public service that our weather persons provide to us. They are individuals who spend a considerable amount of time. They have a ton of public trust. And literally, when increasingly we see severe storms coming through our communities, they are our eyes and ears to tell us when we can protect ourselves. And to see that someone who had spent their career fighting and protecting the public had been subjected to this was something that I knew I needed to take immediate action. So we shifted the bill a little bit. John can get into some of those specifics about how we maybe tweaked this bill a little bit on the model language. But there is both to answer your question about the sentencing, there is both a civil and a criminal component to this, which is very important. The civil component allows those who are the victims of this to seek from the people that are creating these deep fakes and distributing them the cause of the damage that has been cast upon them. Also allows them to collect any profits that this individual has benefited from. And I think it takes the civil penalty up to $150,000 that they can claim. Now, criminally, it's a Class E felony, which is no less than 1 year and no more than 6 years for the Class E. And then there's also a provision in there that if this is basically someone does a deep fake that impedes or affects legislators or legislation, government officials, then that bumps it up to a Class C felony, which carries a sentence of 3 to 15 years in prison. So there was concern around people trying to use deep fakes to alter the government decision making and exploit government officials. So that's why we added that. But I think it was very important to add both a civil and a criminal penalty for this to try to prevent this.
Absolutely. John, I want to turn it over to you. While Bree was trying to negotiate her departure from Channel 5, she was also wanting to speak out about these deep fake images and the social media scams. How did you all navigate this?
Well, thank you, Judge Escobar. Thanks for having us here today. You know, not every person who's going through something like this wants to use it as an opportunity to help other people. And I was really struck by the fact that, from the beginning of my representation of Bree, she made it very clear that she didn't want other people to experience what she's experiencing. And if she could use this as an opportunity to help others, she wanted to do that. So I'm not sure, by the same token, every lawyer would feel comfortable letting their client raise their profile on an issue while they're in the middle of a separation from their employer. And I will tell you, that's something that we had to have a lot of conversations about, and how raising her profile on this issue could impact her situation with News Channel 5. And so through a lot of communication between us, we're in touch almost every day these days, and have been as the legislative session unfolded. We have tried to balance, Bree's interest in her orderly separation from her previous employer with also really striking while the iron is hot. The legislature was already, coming to town for session. Across the state line in Glasgow, Kentucky, there had been a very tragic situation involving a young man who took his own life, a 16-year-old boy who took his own life. And we can talk about that more later. But we had the example of Kentucky trying to regulate this issue. And we realized that with Representative Powell out there and others, Representative Yarbrough in the Senate, and eventually Representative Leader Lamberth, I mean, it became a very bipartisan effort that we could get something done, and we could do it, quickly. And so we have our own discussions with Channel 5 going on in the background, but we really spent a lot of effort this spring. Bree would jump in the car and run down to the legislature on a moment's notice sometime, either to testify or to meet with a representative or a state senator. And it became a balancing act, but one that I think, she's proud of what she's been able to do. I won't speak for you, Bree. And also it continues. I mean, we are just chipping away at what is an epic problem, and it's going to take a lot more work, I think.
Well, that is a perfect segue to my next question. From my research, this law passed in the House with 94 yeses and 0 noes, and in the Senate with 32 yeses and 0 noes. So this moved very quickly on a fast track in the legislature. Can you describe the whirlwind process of taking this draft legislation and getting it passed and hopefully getting it signed by the governor? Do you want to start, Representative Powell?
Sure. So I'll start off and say that we introduced the bill beginning of session. It was a very fast legislative session. We knew that the pretty much the middle of April was going to be the end date. So bills moved very quickly, and quite frankly, time got a little bit away from us just because we knew that this was a piece of legislation that at least I did, that I was going to run. Senator Yarbrough was willing to run it. He had also co-sponsored the bill with me previously for the minors that we didn't get any traction on. So he was very willing to run the bill again. I sit on the criminal justice subcommittee as part of my role as a member of the full judiciary committee. And so this bill just happened to get assigned to my committee, given the criminal component to it, which is a nice advantage because I get to know the members of that committee very well and develop those relationships, and then know how that bill, that committee flows with the bill process. So I worked the bill behind the scenes very hard, but I knew ultimately the success of the bill was pretty much going to hang on Bree's willingness to come up and not only share her story, but work the bill. I mean, she has such a fantastic reputation, and this is a nonpartisan issue that I knew that was really key. And so we actually also developed a media strategy, given Bree's media background and personality. And we had somebody in our House leader, Ken Jobe, who's our House press secretary for the Democrats. We made sure that the media knew about this, and so there was a lot of interest, as you know, around Bree, and people didn't really understand her departure, and were curious why she had the background behind that. So we knew that this was going to be, when we ran the bill, going to be a big story, and so we went ahead and put it on notice. I got to tell you, it was one of the most challenging days. The bill we had this in the subcommittee. 30 minutes before this, I literally had to break up a fight between two of my colleagues. Seriously. So it was a very, very tense day. But Bree came up, gave her testimony, spoke on the bill. And from there, I think it was on the right path. I can talk a little bit more about how we needed to change sponsors, and we got a little bit into the headwinds of politics. But just her advocacy of the issue and the recognition that the bill got through the media really helped us out tremendously. One thing I will say too is when we brought the bill forward and had it filed, we did have somebody from the telecommunications industry that reached out to us, and they wanted to go ahead and add some clarifying language to make sure that these companies like Facebook or like say Verizon or AT&T could not be held liable for these images being shown over their networks. So we had already added that amendment to the bill. That certainly helped. So the industry was basically okay with it. And then the final component was, we had previously, you might remember, there was a bill that ran dealing with AI and the songwriters had brought. And so a lot of my colleagues were very familiar with AI, and we had kind of worked through AI, so that was also very helpful. It was no longer a novel concept because of the Elvis Act, the bill that we had passed last year.
Wonderful. John, do you have anything you want to add?
I mean, just anecdotally, one thing I can share is I developed a real appreciation for the power of your local meteorologist to bring people together. I mean, walking around the halls of the Cordell Hull building with Bree, it's like, it's as if Taylor Swift is walking through the hall there, because people, no matter who you are, you depend on your meteorologist to give you accurate information about your weather, keep your family safe, all that stuff. And so people would stop and take selfies and all that. So it was a tremendous advantage. She was able to use her reputation in the community to help get this bill moving in a way that, I don't think many other people could have done that. Um, I will give a shout out again to Representative Powell for being so generous about not needing credit for getting this done. He was willing to work with whoever he needed to work with and put whoever's name on the lead sponsor line or whatever in order to get this passed. And that kind of unselfishness, plus personal attention. I mean, having been involved in plenty of issues in the legislature, a lot of the time there's lobbyists running around negotiating the bills. No offense, but that happens. And here we had legislators who were, deeply, passionately committed to getting this done, and we're talking to each other about it and working across the aisle to get it done. So it was a fairly heartwarming experience to, try to get a piece of public policy passed that I think everybody agrees is helpful, and nobody wants their family member to go through something like what Bree has gone through and is continuing to go through. And we can talk a little later about the platforms and Meta and others, and how probably the next step and steps that are being taken at the federal level are starting to require the images to be taken down, and that's helpful too.
Well, it's refreshing to hear how everyone came together. Bree, do you have any perspective on how you just all of a sudden became an advocate at the legislature?
Scary. I can say that. I mean, from the get-go, I did, I am a person that believes that our story is meant to serve other people. And so I certainly didn't want what happened to me to be a beginning and an end with just me. And every step along the way, John kept saying, like, you don't have to testify. You don't have to say everything. You don't have to tell the whole story. Like, you don't have to put yourself out there. And I said, no, I want to put everything out there. I want to put everything out there. But I was very nervous, especially that first time that I came to speak, that the mountain of overcoming misunderstanding, right? The mental weight of having to sort of educate and advocate, having experienced it, is a lot that it might not have been received as with as much dignity as it was. Every single lawmaker that I spoke to, whether it was one-on-one in their office or, outside the elevator or in an elevator, or even when I was testifying, every single person just had a deep humanity and a deep dignity of like, this is wrong. This is wrong. Like, you're not allowed to take someone's face, their image, their likeness, distort it in a really disgusting, exploited way. And you're certainly not allowed to weaponize a trusted member of the community's reputation to hurt the community. And so that was actually a big step for me just in this process personally. Like it helped me feel like I finally had some agency, and that people really understood, like, no, this is a big deal and it's not a fluke, and it is something that we have to address, especially after learning about that young man in Kentucky. Like, yes, I worked on television as a meteorologist here, and so I have more notoriety than an average person in a community, but this can impact anyone. And so it is an everybody issue, not just a public servant issue.
Great. John had made reference to the new federal law that's called Take It Down, the Take It Down Act. Did you or Representative Powell want to comment on the new federal act?
Sure, I can give you a little overview of it. I'm not an expert on the Take It Down Act, but the general framework is, and by the way, this is a law that in the Senate was sponsored by Ted Cruz and Amy Klobuchar. So again, we're spanning the political spectrum here. And I think, Senator Blackburn has been very vocal on these issues as well. It criminalizes the sharing of this deep fake, pornographic imagery. But it has, I think, a really novel provision in it, which is it requires the platform to remove it within 48 hours of being notified. That is something that Meta, to its credit, has endorsed, and they said they're willing to do that. Bree and I have had our own challenges dealing with Meta. We've gotten to know a Meta employee who's in Middle Tennessee, and she's been helpful, but it's still a very large bureaucracy, and it's hard as all these fake accounts start popping up to get them shut down or flagged as fake accounts. So I do think that's encouraging that the federal law is requiring that the images be removed once the platform is informed of it. I think that there are some smaller platforms who are resistant to that. I think we'll see some litigation around First Amendment rights, as a result of this law, but it is one that has been championed by Melania Trump and signed by the president, I think just yesterday in the Rose Garden. Jason, did I miss any important pieces of that I should have talked about?
No, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, wide bipartisan support, passed overwhelmingly. I think anytime you can pass a bill in Congress, especially in the environment that we're in, it shows just how universally important this issue is and how both sides agree on it. Allows the FTC to add increased penalties for these social media platforms and others that refuse to take it down. So I think this will definitely be helpful as we move forward, so that these images can come down. But as Bree stated, I mean, there's so many different platforms out there. It's tough to track it all down. But by allowing this 48-hour provision to come into effect, hopefully we can get a better handle on this.
Thank you. So John and Representative Powell, you made reference to the Kentucky sextortion case that led to the passage of the law in Kentucky. Did anyone want to speak on that further?
Sure, I'll jump in a little bit. There was a 16-year-old high school student named Elijah Heacock who lived in Glasgow, Kentucky, not too far from the state line here with Tennessee. And one evening, he received some text messages, I think it was, and Bree or Jason may have the details even better than I do, but essentially threatening to put pornographic images of him to release them publicly. These images were made using AI. He had never taken an image of himself in a compromising position. They just created these, put his face on them, and said, if you don't send us, I believe it was $3,000, then we're going to release these in your, small Kentucky community. Within an hour of receiving the messages, what the FBI found was that he sent $50 to this account because that's what he could get. He had texted a friend and was trying to get access to $50, and then he took his own life. It's just a tragic story, and it did, to Kentucky's credit, spur the legislature and Governor Beshear there into action, and so they passed a law there that essentially criminalizes this conduct similarly to what we did in Tennessee. But there's a unique component to it that I really am interested in emulating, and I have not talked to Representative Powell or Bree about this, but there's an educational component where they have to go into schools and inform students about the dangers of sextortion and that this is out there. And so there's a curriculum and there's posters that have to be posted in high schools because it's so easy to imagine how scary that would be as a teenager, to think your whole world is going to just be ruined in these, young years where what other people thinks matters so much, and to not feel like you have any way out. And so I don't know, Representative Powell, but maybe that's something we could work on here too.
Yeah, certainly. Was very piqued my interest when I was reading more into this. I'll add that it's already a felony in Tennessee for sextortion. So fortunately, we already have pretty strong laws in the books. Just a heartbreaking story. I know as a father, I know John's a father too to young children. This is our greatest fear. Literally, when our kids have these devices, is they could fall victim to a scam like this. They could send an image to their friend that they later regret. That once it's out there, it's out there. But what's even more tragic is that as this indicates, is you don't even have to do something to put it out there, because now with these deep fakes, people are taking these images and distorting them to make them look like you put some sort of a compromising image out there, when that's not the case. Oftentimes not the case in most of these situations. So Kentucky does also have a deepfake bill. It only applies to minors. So I'm hopeful too that states across the country, there's 30 different deepfake laws in the books right now that might have changed with sessions being in still across the country. But this is an issue that we must continue to look at. It's a very serious one, and just such a tragic event of what happened in Kentucky.
Well, Representative Powell, you had made mention of industry groups that commented on this particular piece of legislation, like AT&T. I always marvel that when legislators are putting forth these bills, like people come out of nowhere with some good feedback. Can you tell us more about other industry groups or any opposition that you faced?
Sure. So probably the strongest opposition that I faced was just sort of the general nature of the General Assembly. It is very difficult, myself being a Democrat, to pass bills. I'm one who does not compromise myself or my values to try to pass legislation. So, the other difficulty with the deepfake bill was we ended up having a small fiscal note attached to the bill because of the criminal enhancements that we were making. And even those were small, it meant that the bill still had to go through both the sub and full finance committees. There was a sweeper in the Senate side, but on the House side, it had to go through those committees. And I know that in the General Assembly, finance is often a place where good bills go to die. So these bills will pass through their full traditional committees and then go to finance, and they won't get funded, and you'll never see them again. So I did not want that to happen this time. Preemptively talked to Leader Lamberth about the bill. He and I were both elected in 2012. We're very different political ideologies and have a sometimes combative relationship on political philosophies, but remain on pretty good terms with him. And we both served on this committee. The other thing is Bree is a resident of Sumner County, and Leader Lamberth represents Sumner County. So she and he have a sort of relationship through different organizations they're both affiliated with. We made sure that we reached out on the Senate side. I want to give Senator Hale credit. He was willing to take over sponsorship on the Senate side if we needed it. He assured us that things were a little bit more tame on the Senate side than the House side. So I ended up coming off as the lead sponsor once it got out of the subcommittee and let Leader Lambeth run the bill through the House. But it was important. I did have to have ongoing communications with the leaders of the fiscal committee to make sure that the bill got funded. It did end up getting into the budget. So it was funded. And then from that point, we were able to pass it. The very minimal industry feedback because we had put that provision on very early. So that was helpful. But, quite frankly, until a bill is passed in both chambers and we've adjourned for the year and there's no mechanism to bring it back and the governor has signed it, I don't celebrate. So we were, Bree it was great. She was able to come sit in the gallery in the House when we passed it. We were able to recognize her. Everybody, was excited to see her there. And she didn't have to share her story again, but just so many people had read and heard about her story and already admired, who she is, but her courage to come forward and speak. So literally we had legislators going out in the hallway after the bill passed, taking selfies with her. So that was fun. It was a nice moment of bipartisanship. And we were happy that the bill was able to pass, but we'll see. We'll continue to, now we got to make sure that we watch the bill, that some of the industry doesn't come and try to alter the bill moving forward. So that's something you've also got to take into to play when you pass these bills, is to monitor them, because oftentimes groups will come together after bills pass and say, well, we didn't have that on our radar, we should have tweaked that, and they'll try to come back with some legislation. So it's about continuing to work on bills to make sure that they evolve as technology evolves, right? But then also making sure that there aren't other attempts to try to undermine the bills that you just passed. So that was really the only opposition. It was a pretty smooth sailing bill for the most part once we were able to get it out of the subcommittee.
Well, I must commend you, Representative Powell, for putting the issue first above yourself, and that is a true servant leader. So I really want to commend you on that.
I appreciate that, Judge. I know this is my 13th year. I've came in with no gray hair, and now you can see I got a head full of it. But I've passed enough bills. This was more about the public and about Bree and making sure that we have good laws in the books to protect Tennesseans.
Thank you. Bree, you've told us what kind of impact this had on you personally. But I wanted to touch on, especially women work so hard in their career, building their career, their reputation. What kind of effect has this had on your career, and what support have you gotten?
It's almost like it's kind of calling me towards a second career of advocacy around this. In the space of being a broadcaster, I'm not on the air right now. It initially was really difficult because it felt like continuing to be the face of weather information was like feeding the beast. And not knowing how to handle this or what recourse there was. I've had a couple people in the last 6-7 months say, well, why still post information? Why not delete your accounts? Why not stop being present digitally? And that doesn't solve the problem. While being targeted and being attacked in a digital space, yes, my initial instinct is like, you want to kind of shrink and you want to hide, because even though mentally I knew I didn't do anything wrong, the shame that you feel from that kind of degradation is a very real emotion. And so trying to process real emotions with cognition around, I didn't do that. That's not me. And just the instinct to want to stand up for yourself, to not want to, even a stray dog growls when it's kicked, has been a very difficult battle to navigate. But the reality is that I deserve to exist in person as the human being that I am, and I deserve to exist digitally with, you know, my name, my decisions, my image, my likeness belonging to me, just like everyone else does, in our culture that is increasingly becoming more technology focused and technology based. And that if the solution to this problem is just that some person is supposed to go sit in the corner and not exist, that's not the solution. Because if it's not me, it's just going to be somebody else. And the reality is that this technology is growing and advancing. And so I believe we are still very much in a catching up to it kind of frame of mind while it is still evolving. And so while it feels like a good time that forces that bipartisan support is coming together and lawmakers are coming together and we're starting to look at holding people accountable, we have to keep our foot on the gas pedal because the technology is just going to keep changing and the strategies are just going to keep changing like I've experienced over the last 7 months. They haven't stopped. They're just evolving.
And so that leads me perfectly to my next question. What is next for you? Do you see yourself continuing in this advocate space? What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. Um, It's been a steep learning curve for me. Like I said, prior to this happening to me, I didn't know I didn't even know what to call it. And now that I have found myself sort of front and center of this battle, I have learned so much more about how this exists. Um, and what's quite clear to me is that while there is some shared level of understanding of what AI is, there's still very much not a base understanding of what it is. There isn't a standard vernacular around it. Um, there isn't a resource for victims to go to, for families to go to if they were subject to something like this, as well as resources for victims to heal from it. I think that there's a lot to be done. I saw a question in the chat earlier about, you know, how easy is it to find the perpetrators? And it's not. It's not. Overwhelmingly, what I have learned over the last 6 months, 7 months, is there are, I think what I initially thought happened to me last October was like one bad guy, you know, one dirt bag in a basement with a computer program, just picking on the weather lady. And what I understand now about the world of AI and these imposter accounts and how they're used is that it is sometimes there are people in our communities that create these things. Sometimes it is something that happens on a state level, sometimes it's happening on a domestic level, but there are international efforts to create these imposter accounts. And I think that we have to keep the conversation going. I'm committed to keeping the conversation going and taking it to the next level of not just how do we get these images, right? These this AI content taken down, but how do we stop it in the first place? And how do we hold the people accountable that are creating it, using it, and quite frankly, how do we hold these social media companies accountable for not just taking down the content, but holding the accounts that created or posted it accountable? All I've been able to do thus far is block these nefarious accounts. That doesn't identify their real identity. It doesn't identify where they came from. It doesn't hold them accountable for even creating it. So there are layers to this that I still think we need to catch up to. But the first part is, you know, creating a dialogue, setting a standard, setting that standard at a state level. But then we got to start holding people accountable, because if there are hundreds, if not thousands, of imposters existing on these social media platforms, where are they coming from? Where are they coming from? And we need to hold that person, that entity, or whatever entities it is accountable so that we can protect people better. Because like I said, for me, it was, yes, a very personal, demoralizing, degrading experience. But to know that it has been used to compromise safety for other people is a whole other issue. Like had I have had conversations with some of these imposters online where they have argued with me. I have said, I'm the real Bree, and they've said, no, you're not. And it's like, yes, I am. But I also have seen a dialogue. Someone was pretending to be a fan manager of mine. They were saying, you know, if you're a top fan, Bree, we'll go to your house for $300. This person got to the final stage of that conversation. I have seen the receipts, and the imposter said, "Congratulations, you've been chosen for $300. Bree's going to come to your house, but for Bree's safety, we're going to need to make sure that she's coming to a safe home. We need a copy of your passport. We need we need to run a background check. We need the $300." And so they're trying to get people's personal information, like compromising big time identity information. I've seen scam accounts that have pretended to be me, that pretend to be me in distress. They'll message someone and say, "Nobody knows, but my husband and I are separated and I feel unsafe. I need help. Can you please message me over here because I don't feel safe messaging on Facebook?" They'll see my messages. And so they're preying on people's good nature and their willingness to want to help someone in distress. Or they're tricking them into saying, "Oh, it's for her safety. We need your passport." And it's like, all of that is super unsafe for a community. It is unsafe for a person who's targeted by these AI scams. It is just as unsafe for the followers or the family members or the friends that are then targeted to give personal information away. Because I think what's most dangerous about how AI is being used now is that initially it felt like it was like, you know, this hyper filtered humanoid, but by taking real people and just altering them enough, you capture their reputation in their community, and in doing so, you catch other people off guard. Other people are more willing to say, "Well, I know Bree. Oh, great, she's messaging me." It doesn't bring stranger danger up. It doesn't sound like a money grab scam. It sounds like, "Oh, well, this might be the next thing she's doing in her career." And so there are layers to the danger to it.
Well, I think we have come to our conclusion. Bree, I can't thank you enough for your courage and your bravery in speaking out and advocating for change in the law. You have spent your career protecting citizens, as we talked about, and you've done it again with your
Thank you.
advocacy. So I really admire you. Representative Powell and John, thank you for listening to the citizens who are crying out for help, and you have changed the law that will protect the citizens of Tennessee. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back to the Women's Political Caucus.
Thank you, Judge Escobar, Bree, John, and Representative Powell for this program today. It's fascinating. It's fascinating but sad at the same time. And thank you for continuing to speak out and do this. We will have this up online on our YouTube page so people can watch it. And for those of you all who are getting CEs today, we will turn it in for you so you do not have to worry about it. Tabitha, do you have anything else?
No, that's it. Thank you so much to our panelists and especially to Bree for sharing your story today. It means a lot to us.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having
Everyone
me.
have a great day and stay safe with the weather today.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.